face the loss exposure, but now you've got an ally to help you pay for the financial consequences of that. So how do insurance and insurance contracts benefit insureds? So insured is, of course, one party to the contract. We have the insurer on the one hand and the insured on the other. Insurance contracts indemnify their customers. So basically, we could call insurance contracts of indemnity. There are other contracts of indemnity that are in the marketplace, but insurance is the most common example. So what happens when an individual has a loss is that insurers indemnify their customers. They provide a form of indemnification. To indemnify someone means to compensate them and perhaps to make them financially whole, but we'll talk more about that a little bit later. But basically, insurance contracts indemnify you. I have a loss, I file a claim with my insurer, and my insurer compensates me, they indemnify me. They provide some sort of financial resolution to that loss. It also reduces uncertainty in the sense that I know that if I have an insurance contract, in the event that I have a loss, which again, I don't know if I'm going to have a loss or not, I don't know how much that loss is going to be, but I know that in the event that I have a loss, that the insurer will provide some sort of financial restitution for that. So in a sense, it reduces the uncertainty. One could say that when you buy insurance and you pay a premium to an insurer, it's like paying a known loss. Without insurance, you are faced with a situation where you may or may not have to pay out a loss. With insurance, you pay a known loss in the form of a premium. It also encourages efficient use of resources. Imagine, if you will, if firms did not have access to insurance and they had to save money. They had to set money aside in very liquid form to be able to pay a loss when in fact it happened. That would perhaps be a very inefficient use of those resources. And also insurance and insurance contracts and insurers provide incentives to their customers to reduce and prevent losses. There are numerous examples of this in auto insurance and various types of property insurance and workers' compensation insurance. And many insurers actually are partners with their customers in those efforts. How does insurance benefit businesses and society? It supports credit. You as a bank would not loan money to someone, an organization or a business or an individual, if they did not have proper insurance on the asset that they were loaning money for. Also, it satisfies various legal requirements. Individuals, of course, have to have auto insurance in most states. Workers' compensation insurance is another. And, of course, a new requirement that has emerged recently is with the Affordable Care Act. Individuals have to have health insurance, and firms will have to provide health insurance to their employees beginning in 2015. It also satisfies business requirements. You may have a contractor that comes onto your work site or to your place of business or your home. You would want them to have adequate liability insurance to cover any losses they may have caused. Insurance firms are a big source of investable capital. They collect premium dollars. They pay losses out later. And depending upon the type of insurance, there may be opportunities to take those monies and invest it. And so insurance firms are a good source of investable capital for a lot of projects in the United States. And also reduces social burden. Again, imagine, if you will, a situation where people did not have access to insurance or insurance markets, and random things happened to them, either personally or to their property, and they would be destitute, for example, or they would be in need of various types of disaster relief or charity, and so it reduces those social burdens that might be forthcoming. What is the cost of insurance to insurers? Well, clearly the most obvious cost, or the direct cost, is premiums. Insurers, you have to pay premium dollars. That's money you give to an insurer, and certainly that has an opportunity cost, meaning the more money you give to an insurer, that is money that you can't use for an alternative purpose. You can't invest that in other assets. And so there is an indirect cost to buying insurance because you're tying up funds, if you will, with the insurance firm in the form of a premium when you may have an alternative use for that, which would be a positive gain. What are the costs associated with insurance? Well, clearly we have operating costs. Now, economists would call that transactions costs. So an insurance firm does provide contracts of indemnity. That's what they sell. But insurance firms do have operating expenses, right? They have employees. They have property they have to maintain, they have distribution expenses, they have advertising expenses, they have premium taxes that states charge them. And depending upon the type of insurance firm and how they're constructed or how they're formed, they may also include a profit. If it's a stock insurance company, they have investors. Investors should want a rate of return on their capital, so that insurance firms might make a profit. Another cost associated with insurance is, notice the next two have to do with hazards. So we have here moral hazard and then morale hazard. So I'm going to take morale hazard first and then come back to the moral hazard issue. So again, if you recall from our previous discussion, a hazard is something that increases either the frequency or the probability of a loss or the severity of the loss. So it makes losses more likely to happen, or it makes losses more severe than in the absence of the hazard. There are some physical hazards, of course, but then there are also these things called morale and moral hazards. So we'll look at the third bullet point, morale hazard, first. So these basically are types of claims or losses that are caused by carelessness or indifference on the part of the insured. So individuals who perhaps text while they're driving, or people who don't lock up their property, or students I have who are in the tech center on campus, and they have iPads and iPhones and laptops, and they walk off and leave them because they're just very forgetful. Those are types, and then they're stolen afterwards. That's a morale hazard issue. But then we also have this issue of moral hazard. So I want to spend a little bit of time on this because moral hazard is an important part of any insurance transaction. So moral hazard, the classic examples would be, as you can see here, fraudulent activity, inflated claims, things we would probably call insurance fraud. And those are definitely examples of moral hazard. Arson, murdering someone for life insurance proceeds, those are examples of moral hazard. And the reason why they're called moral hazard, I suspect, is because this activity involves behavior which is morally suspect. However, there are other examples of moral hazard in insurance contracts. So, for example, if someone becomes unemployed, maybe they become unemployed through no fault of their own, and they have 18 months of unemployment insurance, then they may be not very careful about looking for a job. They may not be as diligent about looking for a job as they would be if they didn't have unemployment insurance. So even though unemployment insurance may not have caused them to become unemployed, the fact that they're not aggressively looking for a job, that is actually increase the severity of the loss, and that would be considered a moral hazard as well. So what I like to think of moral hazard is I think, well, moral hazard is when someone has insurance or things that look a whole lot like insurance, like disaster relief, then their behavior changes. And their behavior changes in a way to increase frequency or severity of losses. I'll give you one more example of what I would consider to be moral hazard. When I give an exam to my students, and if the average is 65, they all want to know, well, is there a curve or not? If I gave them a 10-point curve, I've just given them something that's like insurance. I've given them great insurance. And so if I give them a 10-point curve to bail them out because they didn't study as much, they probably won't study as much next time. So that gets a behavior change. So moral hazard is something that is present in all types of insurance. It's just a matter of how much moral hazard there is and what degree it is. So what we worry about a lot in controlling insurance contracts is controlling moral hazard. So again, moral hazard would be the case where someone's insured and that changes their behavior in a way to increase frequency or severity of losses. Sometimes that behavior change is immorally illegal or against the law, and sometimes it's not. Frivolous lawsuits that are settled as nuisance claims, that's also a cost associated with insurance. One would imagine there wouldn't be as many frivolous lawsuits if people didn't have insurance. So that's also an example of moral hazard as well.
Thanks, Rob. And we've arrived at the first of our three polls for our audience. The question we have is, which of these costs is an indirect cost of insurance? The poll will be open until all attendees have responded, or 30 seconds, whichever occurs first. The options include A, opportunity cost, B, fraudulent claim cost, C, morale hazard cost, or D, frivolous lawsuit cost.